Hello, everyone. We're live. We're going to be talking with Sede Picante today. Just sent it to him. We'll have it pulled up momentarily. He should be able to join. Ooh. Because he's who he is. Ooh. I decided I would dress up so that he could join. Or I'll dress up as Mr. Picante joins. He should hopefully be in here any second now. We're going to be going over the Trent Horn video today. We're going to be going over one of his recent post-crash out videos. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Hello, can you hear me? Can you say something? See if I can hear you.
Hello, I am here.
Okay, I can hear you. There you go. You saw that I dressed up for you?
Yay!
Woo!
You look like an American.
I know. I don't have anything goofy. But this is probably sufficiently goofy, I think.
For getting a job?
What'd you say?
For getting a job?
Well, I think this would look pretty weird in an interview. I don't know.
Let's go together. I'd like to rustle your cows. Like, you came dressed for the job. This is amazing.
Yeah, there you go. It's perfect. I didn't expect the mixture of Legend of Zelda and Christmas going on right here.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Let me pull this bad boy up. Hopefully everyone's in here. Hopefully Phil's available, the #1 commenter.
I should tag him or something.
Okay. You know what? This is going to suck because I just realized it's going to show it like this if I don't make it big screen, because I only have one monitor. If I make it big screen, I can't see you or the comments.
Yeah, you need to get 2 monitors to stream.
Yeah, for real. I didn't realize that. Well, sorry guys, but you're going to have a limited view for tonight so that I can see the comments.
Did you already explain the video? Like,
no, not yet. I'll do my intro in 1 second.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new crusade. We have at least Phil watching. I'm not sure who else is watching today. Joining us, despite the way his name looks, is Sede Picante, or Link Vacantist, as he's decided to call himself today. We're going to be going over one of Trent Horn's recent post-crash out videos. So I don't know what started the crash out. I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago. I don't know when the turning point is, kind of what you would call it. But there's definitely a pre and post era you can get at pretty easily. Let's see here. This one is going to be, what was it called? It was called Undue Burdens of Trads or something. The Heavy Burdens of Catholic Fundamentalism. In this video, he basically just invents Catholic fundamentalism as a term. As far as I know, that's never really applied generally to We're Very Handsome, especially the elf. I don't think fundamentalism is usually applied to Catholics, but Trent decided to make up that term, so I guess we have to work with it now.
Yeah, and I'd like to just point out that when he uses fundamentalism or tradition, he does not distinguish between different types of tradition or fundamentalism. He just simply throws it as a catch-all phrase for everyone he doesn't like.
Yeah. One of my really big issues was, and that's kind of what I had written down. This whole video is essentially him. He's done this post crash out. What he's done is he has taken, and especially this video is one of the best examples because he basically invents a term. Like I said, I don't think fundamentalism is usually used in the context of Catholics. And so when he starts using this term in a way that it's not usually used, he's able to essentially build this super straw man. And when you watch the video, you can really tell he takes like this thing that he doesn't like from this person and this thing that he doesn't like from this person. And he kind of creates this archetype of what a fundamentalist is. So Trent Horn's fundamentalist, doesn't let his wife leave. He hates 401ks. He's a sedevacantist. He also calls the Pope Bergoglio. Like, these are all of the things that his, prototypical Jungian, his
Sorry, I just saw the thumbnail.
yeah. So those are the three examples that I used for the thumbnail, and that I just used right now verbally. Those are also three of his biggest examples that he brings up. And so we can kind of get into it, but yeah, that's kind of to build on what you said. He's kind of just builds this giant straw man. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, let's go into it. I, by the way, clipped this, so I clipped out a lot of the examples, but
got it.
the essence will be there.
Yeah, there we go.
And in the world of online Catholicism, there are loud voices that also bind heavy burdens upon the faithful, burdens that the church does not require. So in today's episode, I'm going to focus on the danger of what I call Catholic fundamentalism.
So can we stop right there?
Yes.
So he uses the word burden,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think he understands what the word burden means in terms of Catholicism. Because I'm under no burden to be on this stream. I'm here voluntarily. And 99% of Catholics in the world are Catholic voluntarily.
Yeah, so that's true. Yeah. And I think that this is almost, in my opinion, I feel like you could almost call this like fallacious well poisoning. He starts off this way. Everyone, so you're coming into this assuming that this is what's happening, that there are all these unfair burdens, and now we're sitting here at this pause screen going, okay, well, what are these unfair burdens? And so that's not really and usually the way that you present an argument, I don't think. At least maybe not in a way that is that biased. So in this next clip, Trent says you should be trad, but don't be too trad. Let's see.
Now, I don't like a similar term that often comes up in these contexts, radical traditionalism. That's because there's nothing wrong with being traditional or preferring more traditional forms of liturgy or devotions. There's also nothing wrong with wanting to live a more traditional lifestyle. But traditionalism turns into fundamentalism when those good yet optional traditions get imposed on everyone.
Okay, so this almost sounds like what Protestants do, where they say like the traditions of man versus the traditions of God. And I'm not like a theologian or anything, so I have no ability to differentiate between what the different levels of teaching are. But any Catholic knows that you have different levels of teaching. So there are some things that you have to assent to different degrees, So I just think it's kind of starting in a way that's kind of interesting.
Let's keep going.
Okay, let's see. Mr. Lurker says Trent's face looks tired, like an overworn boot. Why did Trent do this to him? Another thing was that with the rad trad term, I don't like that either. I was joking around on Twitter today about how if you're on X, you're not a traditionalist for being on the internet. I'm sure that there are some real trads out there, but they're probably all like 90 years old and on the verge of death, and they've been alive since Vatican II. All right, let's see here. Next video.
For example, there's nothing wrong with a family that doesn't use natural family planning, or NFP, and is simply prepared for whatever number of children that proceed from their union, provided they can give those children a dignified life. But it is wrong to demand that everyone live that way and reject natural family planning as being sinful. You cannot prohibit what the church permits.
Okay.
All right,
yeah, I guess, right?
Huh? Because he uses the term dignity in there. And isn't the whole reason you would use the natural family planning because you were trying to get the proper dignity to the individuals, to the children? But then he separates that and makes his own unique teaching of natural family planning that's over here and other things over here. They have nothing to do with one another. Isn't like the teaching one?
Huh? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like he's loading the deck.
Are you down with NFP? All right, next one. Let's see here.
For example, on contraception, the far left and the far right say there is no moral difference between contraception and NFP. The liberals say that we should treat contraception like NFP and say contraception is not sinful. And the far right say that we should treat NFP like contraception, both of them being sinful.
Okay, this is so here's a complaint I have with his methodology. In my opinion, when you're doing a left or right spectrum, the right wing is the truth. It's an objective truth. It's Catholicism essentially, and everything else is left wing. No matter what direction you go into, communism is left wing in the true dichotomy of truth and lies, and libertarianism is left wing in the same way. And so it's just kind of weird to claim, like, the way he sets it up is like Catholicism is somewhere in the middle, and then you go on either, like, I don't know, they're both, hypothetically, if you take him at his word, they're both just variations of what is the truth. The left and right thing also seems to be like a way to kind of load judgment, I guess.
Yeah. The note that I wrote for this is just that he didn't distinguish between the intention of NFP and the intention of contraception. Because I've heard it even when I was at Franciscan University. You don't really talk about it, but like, hey, are you having a hard test? Maybe you want some contraception so you don't like have extreme cramps if you're one of those girls that gets it. And it's like, again, he takes these ideas out of their moral context and makes them into this this dilemma here, where no matter what you choose, you're wrong. It's very strange.
Yeah, well, and that's my understanding. Another thing that you're to add on, or to specify, that you were saying that he definitely does not draw the line between, is that it natural family planning is very effective, and it can for sure be used with a contraceptive mindset, and it is no longer acceptable when it's used that way. If you just say, I have 2 kids, I never wanted more than 2 kids, and then you NFP your way to 10 years of no children, then like you can't be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Trent positions this in the terms of Aristotelian means between extremes. So that's kind of what I was saying.
Liberals err in permitting what the church prohibits, and fundamentalists err in prohibiting what the church permits. Both groups fall into error because each rejects what the teaching office, the living magisterium of Christ's church, says.
Okay. You said this is a straw man. Currently, most Christian traditions in the world that have doctrinal chaos, leftist fundamentalist.
Yeah, because he's making the straw man that if you're not where he is, you're going to be like, oh, I'm allowing things that don't exist. And then, but usually the clips are for what's coming next, by the way. And then, so no matter what you do, you're going to be wrong. But then it's as if he doesn't actually live during the time of Francis, that Francis causes the confusion. It's insane.
Yeah.
And Catholic fundamentalists often exhibit a strange inconsistency on this point. On the one hand, they'll lord the bishops and the Pope over Protestants and even Eastern Orthodox, saying the bishops are the reason Catholicism does not have the doctrinal chaos other groups have.
Okay, so the bishops, like, he's basically saying that we are kind of using an argument, but then not dealing with the consequences of the truth of that argument is kind of what he's saying. You're saying that the bishops cause all this, like a bedrock and a lack of chaos, but you're dissenting and causing chaos is essentially what his accusation is. The issue is that you and I could just both say the same thing back at him. Yeah.
I mean, there is always a certain amount of truth that Trent Horn presents, but it's kind of like you needed to actually finish the thought instead of just presenting it and then you're done. It doesn't help us.
Yeah, most of my complaints for this specific video. Yeah.
Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah, most of my complaints for this specific video come later when he starts bringing up individual people. So we can keep going with my biggest.
I'll probably cut them all out.
Did you? Okay, well, we'll see. I'll bring it up as it goes through. We'll see what happens. No, you're not being shadow banned for Fumos. John the Fool. My whole audience right now is just Sede Picante's audience. So coming up, we're going to look at the straw man against the rights of the right-wing fundamentalists.
But on the other hand, they'll also say the bishops are a bunch of modernist heretics, and so you don't have to listen to them, especially the Pope, who they simply call Bergoglio. What a message, right?
Okay, this really bothered me because he puts people in here who verbally and regularly affirm the fact that they think that Pope Francis is the Pope, and they call him Pope Francis. Like I would be one. He talks later about Jacob Imam and Tim Gordon. Jacob Imam and Tim Gordon are not like you can sit there and accuse them of being schismatic, but that's just not true. They're both in good standing with lots of different priests with the hierarchy. Like they don't call him Bergoglio. And so that's why I'm saying he's creating this like Jungian archetype of the fundamentalist, and he's attributing all these different people's issues to them, but none of these share any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Our next Trent point is supposedly good. Let's see what he says.
Become Catholic and leave the subjective poison of Protestantism. But don't listen to the church's heretical leaders. Instead, just follow this Catholic influencer on social media. Well, how is that different from a Protestant who follows his favorite pastor on YouTube?
So now he's talking about all the Sede Picante followers following Pope Sede Picante.
But he's also talking about himself. That's the best part.
Yeah. Coach P, the YouTube channel is just my account. It's just A New Crusade. If you search it, you should be able to find it. Let's see. Yeah, he's talking about himself. He's talking about Catholic Answers. Lots of people cite Catholic Answers like they're a church authority. Mm-hmm. So it's just, and if for this argument to stay consistent, essentially you would have to, every argument you make would have to have a direct living bishop's citation. And then at that point, if I come up with a contradictory one, then what? We have to poll the bishops and do what the majority of bishops say. Like what is the rule that we're using here? Let's see. He follows Pasta Phil. Wrong liturgical season. Setting confirmed. Guys, he's on the Julian calendar. He's that much of a he's that much of a fundamentalist. Although I think that's still disqualified.
And they often do this by finding anything a previous council or pope or saint said in the past, and then claim this is some kind of infallible universal teaching that still applies today.
Okay, so you would have seen at the beginning of that, he brings up Peter Diamond, which is like the worst and most unfair and uncharitable. And he doesn't even talk about him. He just brings him up. Like he just shows him. So everybody who doesn't know is going to have no clue. And everybody who knows who Peter Diamond is going to be like, oh, this guy's a cuckoo. All the rest of these people are cuckoos. This is some more well.
And the problem is that he's not making distinctions in the infallible statements and teachings between what is in authority and what's not, and why it is. And because he's just trying to do these really short videos. So like, we don't know what he's talking about. He could be telling us the truth, but then we need to know which teachings is he talking about.
Yeah. For this to work, he would have really needed to essentially release like an individual part series where he, defines the fundamentalist. And then he says, here's an example of a sede vacantis fundamentalist. And here's an example of a I won't let my wife leave the house fundamentalist. And here's an example of a I hate 401ks fundamentalist. Like for this
cut out. I cut out all the 401k stuff. I don't even know what the point of that conversation was. It's so low hanging fruit that like he's like, this is my example. We disagree on this economic thing. What, are you an economist, Trent Horn? Are bishops economists? Like,
yeah,
no one knows. So it's
like, natural family prostitution. Well, I'm not accusing Trent Horn of this. You're watching him do it, so you can see here. It'll only keep happening. Let's continue.
For example, some fundamentalists will say that licit sexual behavior between husbands and wives is actually sinful. And then others will go further than them and say, quote,
wait, I want to read this. Kissing and hand-holding before marriage are forbidden according to Catholic moral theology. Okay, again, this is contra-religious hippie. Kissing and
hand-holding before marriage are forbidden according to Catholic moral theology. Others will go even further and cite past saints and councils and say that any kind of dancing between unmarried people is sinful.
So, okay, for both of these, he says that these people are saying that this thing that the church allows is not allowed, and that's why they're wrong. Trent, that's the whole debate. You're assuming, you're just presupposing your correctness. Also, I really don't like that last guy you showed is Gabby, and Gabby's a pretty mainstream dude. Once again, someone who's in not at all generally controversial. So adding him to the stack just seems like it really doesn't make sense to me.
Well, so he starts off the statement with, so illicit stuff that is allowed by the church isn't liked by people who don't like what the church says. Yeah, he stacked the deck. He started off not asking, is couples dancing, appropriate for people who are not married? The church actually released specific guidelines on that are very, very complex. But instead, he just starts off, and then he's like, since we already accepted we're right, and then dancing, everyone does dancing anyway, so like, what's the problem here? You're already like mentally mind controlled to like, well, of course dancing's okay. I do it in my bedroom in front of the mirror.
Yeah. Well, and it just doesn't like in Nick Cavazos did a video contra the Trent Horn being pro dancing. And he cites all these saints in it, which is something that in local American catechisms and local American ordinances and stuff like that, pretty recently of people not being allowed to come in and people not being allowed to dance. But so it's like Nick says no dancing is wrong. Here are all these examples why, and then Trent just says no, dancing is permitted, and that's all he says. He doesn't. He gives no argument for, like, he just is presupposing all his correctness and everything, and then just taking 5 minutes to explain why you're wrong, and never giving his own argument, which is pretty disingenuous, honestly. Oh wait, let's see what I want to read this real quick. Trent doesn't seem to understand that a canonized source is not removed or not good for pious reasons.
Fundamentalists defend these opinions not by appealing to current church teaching, but by their own private interpretation of any past church document that they come across. And they assume that these documents, which may just contain suggestions rather than infallibly binding teachings, were universally binding then and are still binding today.
So here he's building a dichotomy, like there's two things. There's past teaching and current teaching. No, there's one thing. It's the church's teaching. There is not like two separate. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
But even on dancing, like there's a certain amount of piety you have when the Cure of Ars says no dancing, and then you're like, okay, so that's where we're saying where the rules are. This is where we're crossing into the gray area, and then you have a parental guidance above that, and you can have both of these going on at the same time. But then Trent Horn seems to make it say like, no. If you even hold the thought that dancing could be a gray area, then you're oppressing people and binding their consciences. Like, when did I do that?
Yeah,
very strange.
Yeah, it's silly. Name one saint who contradicts the teaching on dancing. Yeah. Trent is using literalism coming up because sports and physical exercise is natural, so it's presumed good before ruling.
Something can be good even if the church doesn't say so. The church doesn't have an authoritative teaching on ultimate frisbee, but I don't have to wait for that teaching before I go play it. And I don't have to refrain from playing it just because some layperson says that it's sinful because of their private interpretation of past church documents.
Okay. Is ultimate frisbee, Mr. Link Vacontist, is ultimate frisbee a contested moral issue? Has it ever been, or is it now?
No, except maybe on universities, like where they try to co-ed, like this example is so bad. Well, he needs to actually give us a good example. Like, oh, did you know that eating vanilla ice cream was one time considered controversial, but chocolate ice cream has never been? You're like, what is this about? No one knows.
Yeah, well, and it's not like if it would have been like this sport used to be controversial, and then the church ruled that it is not controversial for X, Y, and Z reason, and this applies to dancing. That's an argument that makes sense, right? But his argument is dancing is controversial, And because of that, this is not this is not controversial, and I'm going to draw some tenuous connection between them, which frankly is really not there. Let's not pretend like people purely dance for exercise or out of competition. Like, this is obviously about, intergender, what is it called? Like, dancing for fun. This is not about like competition salsa or ballroom dancing or something like that.
And also, the church's guidelines on dancing were like it had to stop before 9 o'clock at night. So, like, by comparison to what most people consider dancing, it's like, the church is way out over here and we're all over there. If you
Yeah,
have a
it's
late
completely.
wedding, you're dancing till midnight.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
how
Or
it
not
goes.
even if you go to even if you go somewhere like line dancing is a relatively neutral form of dancing. Line dancing bars
Yeah.
are regular bars that stay open till 2 a.m, where people dress horrendously. Ignore my outfit.
Oh, no.
It could only be gravely evil if you think the bishops have no divinely protected teaching authority whatsoever. And if you believe that, then you've rejected the essence of Catholicism.
Okay, wait, I need to rewind and hear this again.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, this clip ages well after it comes out that all the U.S. bishops are on the payroll of the government.
It could only be gravely evil if you think the bishops have no divinely protected teaching authority whatsoever. And if you believe that, then you've rejected the essence of Catholicism.
So, tell me if I'm wrong. His argument right now is that on a contested subject, if you try to bind somebody or tell someone what to do on a contested subject, because the bishops haven't ruled on it, then you are basically saying that they don't have authority. That's his argument, right?
But it's also using a specifically Vatican II argument that the United States Conference of Bishops has power as a conference and not individually to bind the entire American Church. That's also a contested thing because that's an innovation of Vatican II. But again, if you're going to make this argument, I would love to see a statement from a bishop on the USCCB on dancing, and the USCCB on ultimate frisbee, since those were the examples he used. So it's like,
And you would also expect there to be, for his argument to stand on the licity of dancing, he's saying, well, you're citing an old source. Then you need to present essentially new case law that kind of strikes down the old source. You can't assume it just goes away. Although I think that's a hypothesis that Jimmy Akin has put forward, that just stuff after it stops being repeated for a certain period of time, like stops counting, which is pretty problematic. But that's not Trent's thing.
I'm not going to talk about the government for the next year. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But Trent's not done. Even though the U.S. bishops have sold their souls, they're still perfect. Yep, that's how it works. Yeah. Wait.
That Christ's teaching authority comes to us through the bishops. As Jesus said to the apostles in Luke 10:16, he who hears you hears me. Now, I agree, some of the bishops have made really bad judgments, and some individual bishops may be doctrinally suspect. But to say all the living bishops are untrustworthy.
Okay. Well, this is a sede picante thing, obviously. I don't agree with this. That's okay. Lurker is going to bed. Good night, Lurker. Have a good night. Here's why I think it's silly. Okay. We've agreed that dancing is contested. Clearly dancing and being gay are not the same thing, but in Germany, all the bishops there want everyone to be gay. So when the German Conference of Bishops, let's say they come out and they say they're not condemning homosexuality and they're allowing things to happen, that doesn't mean homosexuality is okay. It means that those bishops are wrong. Just like, Trent here is admitting that individual bishops can be wrong.
Trent just said the opposite. See, this is why you have to give actual cases.
Yes, I agree.
You lose.
Yeah.
Thanks, Trent Horn. Be gay is okay.
Yeah. Doctrine is sus.
All right, now next clip.
Oh, oops. Sorry, guys. I'm not a normie. Trust me. Let's see here. Share screen again. Next one. All right. Part 2, baby. We have our little maid girl reading us our story. Have we talked down to our audience?
That was the attitude of the Protestant reformers. They said that the church of the 16th century had become corrupt And in many ways, it was corrupt through practices like simony, the buying and selling of church offices, or sexual sin among the clergy. But the Protestant reformers' answer was not to simply go back to the Bible. The reformers claimed that they were returning to the apostolic origins of the church fathers.
The issue here is that, like, I mean, and I agree with him on this. He's assuming that the reformers were wrong, which they obviously were. But the issue is that if Trent Horn's wrong, then him making this argument doesn't mean anything, and he hasn't made a case for why he's right. He's just saying that he's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really not working. Let's see here. He who hears Trent Horn. All right. Next one. Let's see here. Oh, wait. Next argument is guilt by association. The Protestants were proven wrong. Yeah, this is kind of what I said. Catholic fundamentalists have not all been so.
John Calvin said in a 1539 letter to Cardinal Sadoleto, "You know, Sadoleto, not only that our agreement with antiquity is far closer than yours, but that all we have attempted has been to renew the ancient form of the church."
Okay. So you talk on this. I'm going to formulate my point. Go ahead.
So he's using as an example of radical traditionalists, as radical leftists, as Catholic fundamentalists. We're being compared to John Calvin, who's saying we're just trying to do what's right. Well, that's also known as the heresy of antiquarianism, of trying to go back in time. And so by doing that, he's now linked us to something that Pius IX said was a heresy. But most traditionalists, especially radical traditionalists, think Pius IX is an infallible source of the faith. So he's pretty much just talking down to us, calling us names, because this is another irrelevant point. It would only be relevant to like 1/4 maybe of the people he's pretending to argue against. The very, very liberal. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it doesn't really make sense that, like, when you're in the middle of a crisis, he's saying, well, you guys are like, okay, for example, it's well known that there are saints that were made on two different sides of the Pope wars, essentially. You know, there's two popes. Who's the Pope? The individual people don't know. Saints are made on each side. That's during the crisis. We now know, well, this person was right and this person was wrong, but this, X person still ended up being a saint. We're right now in the crisis. So when you're sitting here and telling these people that you're assuming this contested thing and this is wrong and this contested thing and you're wrong about that, and then you don't present a case for any of it, like, it just seems kind of silly to me when I mean, I don't know if he would acknowledge the fact that we're in the middle of a crisis, but I mean, anyone who's not getting paid to be a Catholic would.
And that's the same mentality of Catholic fundamentalists. They think the true church is found within their private interpretation of scripture and past tradition, just like the reformers thought, and that it's not found in the present day teaching office of the church.
So this argument applies differently depending on which one of the people you're talking about. Like, if he was critiquing you and he had a problem with you, like, once again, he's not really making a case, he's just stating it. But like, you guys could talk about that, I guess, because I guess because you would disagree fundamentally on what person is in charge. You would say it's not Pope Francis, and he would say it is. He and I both agree that Pope Francis is in charge. We might disagree on what that means, but like, so he might call both of us fundamentalists. So, but then what does the critique even mean? Like, what does that term even mean if it accounts for both what you and what I believe? It means nothing. It's because he's just doing what he's accusing everyone else of doing, because everyone who's not Trent Horn is a fundamentalist, either a leftist fundamentalist or a right-wing fundamentalist, right? Like, yeah. I don't know if you have anything else.
No, keep going.
Okay, next one. Q 500 examples of current teaching punting or publicly. Okay. This is another punt. No, he presumes all Catholic bishops teach the same thing. Fiducia supplicans, ring a bell.
Well, so just pause
Once
it for
again,
a second.
that doesn't.
So another big issue is that you have to, even within the magisterium, you should try to distinguish, and Trent needed to, between the essential parts of the faith and the disciplinary parts of the faith, because if we were taking fiducia supplicans as an essential part of the faith, it split the church into at least 4 different churches. So, like, again, you can't be like, this is the bishops, they're always perfect, I'm Trent Horn, and then like something happens like that, because then if we took your words to the bank, we would have to assume the gates of hell had prevailed against Trent Horn's church. That's the actual assumption that you would have to take.
Well, and the issue is that he's essentially, his standard is whatever the bishops believe, and he's using the USCCB essentially as his infallible magisterium. But it just, what doesn't make sense is that, what if half the bishops might completely disagree with something that's come up, and they just might not be willing to speak on it? So who's right then, Trent? Like, he's just, like I said, he's just assuming the bishops believe what he believes. He would make the argument that I just believe whatever the bishops believe, but obviously that's circular and reductive.
Doesn't mean every single bishop is right about everything they say, but Catholics cannot ignore what all the bishops currently teach or permit.
Okay, so what level of dissent is allowed for a doctrine to not be binding? That's the question, right?
See, it keeps on doing this though, because this is a common tactic you have. It's the coping tactic, and this is Sedevacantists point this out all the time. Is if you say, "Oh, these bishops who are living, they're the rule of the faith," instead of what it is actually like, for example, in Eastern Orthodoxy or in Orthodoxy at all. It's like the tradition itself is infallible, not just the people who are here now. It's the tradition itself, going back from the time of Christ to now. Everything that agrees with that is infallible. So all the bishops, as long as they're within that context, are already infallible. But when Trent just goes, "Oh, well, but this guy's kind of a nutcase, but everybody but him is okay. But, oh, this guy over here is also a nutcase." It's like, so now he gets to just judge individual bishops because he's a nutcase, guys. Come on, everyone knows it.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to do?
Well, so then, like, the issue is, let's use he says what all the bishops teach. So what happens when who's the guy who got booted recently? The cardinal or the bishop who's all angry? He was calling Francis a false pope. Vigano. When Vigano is officially a bishop, what's the assumption? And he's dissenting, or when Bishop Strickland dissents and gets in trouble. Okay, they are breaking from your rule, and now not all the bishops are teaching something. What do we have to believe now? Do you just believe what the majority believes? What level majority? A regular majority? A super majority? Is it 51%? Is it 75%? Is it 85, 95? Like, the reason that you have the living magisterium is so that it can interpret that, but it can't like automatically address every single point.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't pretend like that's what it does, because obviously that's not what
also, just one point. If it did, he wouldn't have this job. Okay? We would just have videos of bishops saying what's going on. There's enough of them, they could take turns. It's not a big deal. Bishop Barron does stuff all the time on the internet. Trent Horn wouldn't have a job if what he said was true.
Yeah, exactly. Also, like this,
Arianism is
Roy here is saying, this is totally makes sense. If the Arians, then the Arians, if all it requires is a majority, then Arianism is true, because the Arians won, and for a period of time they were the majority, so it just doesn't make sense. All right, let's go to the next one.
And Catholics cannot impose obligations on others that the teaching office of the church does not require.
Okay, so this is like what you're saying. Let's replay. Listen to that again.
And Catholics cannot impose obligations on others that the teaching office of the church does not require.
Oh, there you go. Well, I guess we'll hear it a third time then.
Yeah, play it. Because that's insane. That's literal insanity.
Wait, oh, sorry. It's paused. Let's.
And Catholics cannot impose obligations on others that the teaching office of the church does not require.
Okay.
Yes, they also physically can't do it.
Yes.
I'm a Sedevacantist. I can't say, I hereby remove all the bishops who disagree with me. No, only the Pope can do. Only the Pope and those in union with the Pope have this authority. So, like, who is he talking to? He's still acting like as if you have a different opinion than him. You're suppressing me with your different opinion.
Yeah, it's like, this is why nobody takes Michael Lofton seriously, right? Because he sits there and he calls everyone a schismatic and a heretic. But guess what? What Trent is saying is actually true, but Michael Lofton is a type of person who he ought to be that this critique actually would apply to, who's constantly accusing people and trying to hold people to certain things. And it's proven why that doesn't matter, because nobody cares what Michael Lofton has to say. If you're actually holding people to completely unreasonable standards, nobody cares. You can't physically make anyone do it unless it's like your children or something. But most of the examples he's given, like, what, you're not going to let your children go dance? Okay, I guess, like, very
I
evil.
also don't get to play ultimate frisbee, and I guess you got cameras in your neighbor's bedroom to see if they're practicing NFP or something. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah,
What are
you
you doing,
hacked their
Trent?
computer and canceled their 401k and took their money out of their account so they can't receive interest. Yeah, it's silly. All right.
For example, some fundamentalists claim it is gravely sinful for wives to work outside of the home. As I said before, this has nothing to do with traditionalism. Ideally, mothers should be home with their young children, but it's wrong to say that mothers working outside the home, even part-time, is gravely sinful.
Okay. So then let's think about this. Tim Gordon always cites one of the piouses. I think it's 11 or 12, one of the last century piouses, who says that it's great. He said it was gravely sinful for mothers to work outside the home. So in the 40s, let's assume that it is. At what point, Trent Horn, does it stop being gravely sinful? You know, like, it just doesn't, I don't know.
Mhm.
Feel free.
Yeah, and so in context, what Trent Horn actually did that I edited out was then he was like, "Oh, and I got this quote from Pius X and this quote from Christopher West, Theology of the Body, and therefore, since they're the most recent guys and they agree with me, they're right." And he
Yeah.
literally has just become where I worship the current pope, and it's like, oh, okay, how's that going for you?
And it's also like, why are you citing Christopher West? He's another example of a guy who has no authority. He posits himself essentially as the I'm brain farting, as the interpreter of theology of the body. But no, you can just read it yourself. Chris West ogles women at the beach as a way of becoming more holy. So keep that in the side of your mind, guys. That's one of Trent Horn's sources. The married man who ogles both skinny and fat women at the beach.
Ooh.
The usual fundamentalist explanation reeks of Protestantism. They'll say that these teachings come from the corrupt modernist bishops, and so they can be ignored. The true Catholic faith is found further back in history, which is also what sedevacantists say and what Protestants also say.
Okay. Once again, he makes the exact same argument against Strickland and against Vigano.
Also, it is in fact begging the question, because instead of actually providing why things are true, because when you just lay out a bunch of quotes and then you realize the people you're arguing with are also just laying out a bunch of quotes, you have to find a way to get rid of their quotes. So by calling sedevacantist Protestants, because we want to go back to say Pius X, who's a saint, and use a quote from him, but he's got a quote from Pius XII. You should actually see harmony here, but you don't. Therefore, Pius X is wrong, even though he's a canonized saint. Like, okay, everyone who disagrees with me is a Protestant. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, and like I said, like, this is where he's building this archetype where, like, I'm sorry, but there is not some type of unifying force of fundamentalism between you and between Peter Diamond and between me and between Tim Gordon and Jacob Imam and all these other people. Like, what is it? We all call ourselves Catholic, and we all agree on like 95% of our beliefs. That's the
Also,
consistent line, except for Peter Diamond. He's kind of a kook.
it does need to be pointed out though that like different Orthodox religions will have the 3 divorces.
Mhm.
That's accepted according to Vatican II as a legitimate interpretation of moral theology. So like there are legitimate changes in some of the other more heretical sects. I use more as so I can be charitable, right? And so, like, again, this is begging the question, who are we talking about other than this is the religion of Trent Horn?
Yeah.
These Catholic fundamentalist explanations also sound like Protestants who cherry pick parts of church history that they agree with while ignoring the other parts that contradict their views. For example, Catholic fundamentalists often quote this part of the 16th century Roman Catechism that says, "Unless compelled by necessity to go abroad, wives should also cheerfully remain at home and should never leave home without the permission of their husbands."
Feel free to elaborate.
No, it explains itself. Like that's what the trads say.
Mhm.
And then you just put the little maid at home. I thought that was kind of funny.
Okay, you say in this next clip of things almost nobody believes, but I found one person who does believe it. He gets pedantic, which is some more down.
They say this means wives can't work outside the home, but this passage doesn't say anything about working. I mean, are wives allowed to do non-necessary things beyond the home, like attend play dates or homemaking classes at other women's houses?
This is an issue I have a lot with the way people argue, is that yes, that if you're not even allowing like work is way more important than homemaking classes. If you're disallowing work, you're obviously disallowing homemaking classes. Like, I hate these stupid, well, what about this appeal? Well, what about this appeal? Like, this is what, here, I'll play the Trent Horn game. Trent, you sound a lot like someone who argues for abortion, constantly trying to bring up all these edge cases. That's something that pro-aborts do, and you're a pro-abort fundamentalist. Like, it's just stupid.
Do wives actually have play dates with other wives?
I mean, it's probably the ones who are healthy do. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that. I'm not married. Yeah, Catholic fundamentalists specialize in play dates.
Do they have to call their husband every time they go out to the store to run an errand to get his permission to leave the house?
Obviously, they do.
This sounds more like a prudential judgment of the 16th century, not a perpetual moral command that must be followed under pain of grave sin.
Okay, so, but that's just his assumption. He hasn't proved that. He's just stating that.
Yeah, but that's the point he actually needs to be making more and more is this a prudential judgment or is this a substantive argument because of external moral reasons? Like if you're going to a play date and there's a rabid dog in the city that might bite you, like then you have a moral imperative to not go on the play date. Like there's other things. And so without bringing in disciplines and then actual teaching, prudence. But this is like what, the second time in the video, I think that he actually mentioned it. And in the actual video, we're 10 minutes in already. So it's like,
yeah,
you didn't set it out from the beginning that way. So it's kind of like he's sneaking it back in so you can have some more credibility in case this audience has figured out that he's a hack.
Well, and it also just doesn't like, he says, well, it's a prudential decision, but then he doesn't say like, here's the prudential reason why this was not okay, and here's the prudential reason why it is now okay. Like we're living in a very different, 16th century, that's 1500s. What is that? 600 years later, we're living in a different world. I don't know. And he's not making the argument for what those differences are.
The Roman Catechism says that married couples should abstain for 3 days before receiving communion, and even longer during Lent. Does that rule still apply today?
So they're not allowed to push their twin beds together every 3 days before Sunday. So, guys, that definitely still applies. You need to keep your twin beds on opposite sides of the room on Thursday through Sunday. Yeah, there are even more pit bulls now. Yeah, exactly. See, Roy knows what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, honestly, you might have an argument nowadays. If you live in like Birmingham or something, you actually probably have a better prudential argument for not letting your wife leave the house these days than you did in the 16th century.
Actually true.
If you live in one of those crazy British villages where you happen to be surrounding a village full of a certain type of other people who like to attack your people, Phil doesn't let his wife watch TV when he's watching Gutfeld on Fox every night.
Heyo.
Trent has a vintage vendetta.
And the Roman Catechism also says you should not marry someone against your own parents' wishes. But here's Tim Gordon, a Catholic who often quotes this passage, saying you don't need the permission of your future father-in-law in order to marry his daughter, and can even marry that woman against the father's wishes.
He's not the authority. It's not his involvement. Asking the father things about your relationship, starting with whether or not you have permission to get married, is kind of like asking your neighbor whether you have permission to decorate your own house. That's between you and the wife, or the future wife, not between him.
Wait, let's go back for a second. Look at the labels. Look at how Tim has labeled himself and how he's labeled his wife. Steph Gordon, a woman.
Yeah.
Did you zoom in on her face? Or did Trent do that?
Yeah, I did that. That was
okay.
funny. But this is actually called cherry picking. Because this is a point where Trent Horn is just simply right, but now it's an example of all trads are wrong. And it's like, no, this is your personal feud with Timothy Gordon. So you should actually change the tone of your video to like what I do when I have feuds with people, literally every person I review, is you lose this is the professional Trent Horn, and you just start yelling at the guy, you call him names, say what he did is wrong, say why it's wrong. Don't be like, and this man who's the perfect example of the thing I'm trying to debunk, he says this. Oh, look how wrong that is. Because it was obviously wrong. But this doesn't mean your case is right, only against Tim Gordon. This is like,
yeah,
and
it's the Jungian issue again of just melding everything together. But Tim Gordon was a public teacher. All Catholic bishops are unanimous on not judging Tim Gordon. Is Trent on his own? Isn't that literally his criticism?
Yeah. Where is the teaching of all the U.S. bishops against Timothy Gordon? Or did Trent look at the tradition and apply it as a infallible source against a case that he had in the world? So he's literally doing what he's criticizing.
Yes.
You can't make it
which
up.
is
These people
obviously the issue.
But that contradicts the Roman Catechism, which says children are, quote, not to engage in marriage without their parents' knowledge, still less in defiance of their express wishes.
So to steelman Trent for a second, but it very quickly falls apart. Trent would say, I'm going to guess, well, I'm just holding Tim to his own standard, right? So, but okay, well, what's your standard, Trent? You haven't really put one forward. So far, your standard is the unanimous agreement of the U.S. bishops, and we've already shown why that doesn't work. All right. In this clip, we're looking back to the original wife working thing. Watch how he avoids the principle for the effects. Next thing, let's see.
The truth is that the nature of work has changed so much over the past 500 years that a wife who tutors children a few hours a week outside the home is far less disruptive to her home life than some so-called trad wives who stay home but spend 6 hours a day making videos where they pretend to spontaneously make homemade cereal for their kids.
But he just assumed that. He didn't prove that. What if I did a study and it turns out the trad wives who do the 6 hours of baking actually have a positive effect, and even just leaving for 3 hours has a worse effect than 6 hours of baking as long as the mom's there? You haven't proven anything.
But the reason why I brought up the causes is like, why? What's the purpose? What's the end? What's the goal of the wife working? He just brings up as if it was disruptive to life. Well, having an earthquake is disruptive to life. Like, there's a billion things in the world right now that's disruptive to life. Your mother watching politics could be disruptive to your family life. But, being sick by the kids could be. So, like, you have to do more in explaining the issue rather than, oh, and there's a trad wife that I saw once on TikTok. What a bad trad wife. She's not allowed to be herself now because you didn't like her? I'm sorry if she likes to make videos. Maybe she made videos with the kids and it was a lot of fun.
Maybe there's someone else who made videos and they have a wife who makes videos, who doesn't make videos anymore, who found it too problematic, and maybe that person is projecting. That's my hypothesis.
This is why we have a magisterium that tells us what past statements are morally binding today and which are not.
But it doesn't always do that, does it?
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do when it
something which
doesn't?
we get YouTube influencers.
Yeah, pretty much. We get Michael often. Thanks a lot. Well, and the funny thing is that it's like, okay, so in when you're in a regular court, you have case law. And essentially what Trent Horn is saying is that if you don't appeal every single decision up to the Supreme Court and you use case law to make rulings, then that's problematic. And in addition to that, he's saying if the Supreme Court does not unanimously rule on the case, then it's also problematic. Like just because the Supreme Court the Supreme Court said that Roe v. Wade was okay, but it never was. That's why it got overturned. And I guess obviously the Supreme Court's not infallible, so it's not a perfect analogy, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Sorry, Trent, I'm allowed to make a legal argument from case law. I'm also allowed to make a canonical argument from canonical law. And I'm not smart enough to do that, but hypothetically.
But so what he does in this next clip is the most insane thing ever. So he oftentimes, Trent Horn structures his videos that he has a problem, quote of a saint, scripture, you're a Protestant. He has this formula. Now he's going to throw scripture under the bus. This is fantastic.
Catholic fundamentalists might say, well, they're just reading the documents and accepting the documents' plain meaning. But that's the same thing Protestant fundamentalists say about the Bible. What seems like the plain meaning of a text may not plainly apply today. For example, some fundamentalists say that women still must veil in church because St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11, any woman who prays or prophesies with her head unveiled dishonors her head. And if a woman will not veil herself, then she should cut off her hair.
Go ahead, Sede.
So what he's done here is he's set up now that scripture, the literal reading of scripture is not actually true, and we can refer to a council to overturn the literal meaning of scripture. By the way, this also invalidates Dei Verbum of Vatican II, if that's true.
Well, and an issue I have with that is that he later, I don't know if you quoted it, but he goes and he cites, like, it was Cardinal Sarah or some conservative cardinal that he cites against the meaning, the plainly applicable, readable meaning that was there. But, like, for example, if a bishop were to say, if you were to email the bishop and say, Bishop, I forgot my, I thought I had my veil and I didn't have it, did I commit a sin? That is a niche, like, subsection of whether or not you're supposed to be wearing one. Like, there are smaller issues within each big thing. And so it's like there are individual rulings on cases that don't apply to everyone. Like, that's how exceptions work. And so he hasn't proven that's what's happening either. I don't know. And this does seem to me to obviously be kind of a contradiction just in general. I'm not even going to try to debate that.
But the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith says such requirements no longer have a normative value, i.e. they are transitory disciplines. They are not binding today.
So does normative value always mean transitory, non-binding going away? Like, what does that mean? Like, he hasn't shown that either.
No, it just means that whatever the church says today is the only truth that exists in the world. And that if the church came out today and said the Mass is not a propitiatory sacrifice, even though the Council of Trent said it was, it wouldn't be. Because the church is the ultimate thing of power. He's become a full-blown Pope respecter. That's all that means. By the way, this change only started, the disciplinary change of changing the text of Scripture only started, how many years ago was that? 49? Yeah.
No comment.
Finally, fundamentalist Catholics want to follow church teachings and attitudes from centuries ago, while often retaining a 21st century attitude of contempt toward the church's current magisterium.
Has he ever read Dante?
Probably.
Do you know where Dante puts a lot of the popes? He puts them in hell. What are you talking about? Like, what? That's so ridiculous. I have never in my life seen I've never seen a Catholic who calls Francis the Pope, who has called any post-Vatican, who has ever claimed that he says, yes, Francis is the Pope, but this Pope from post-Vatican II is in hell. I've never heard anyone ever say that. Dante said that multiple times about popes he disagreed with. So maybe this is when did Dante live? Like the 1200s? Maybe this is really just a 1200 mindset that these evil trads are bringing back.
Let's finish it off.
All right.
As faithful Catholics, we should avoid the error of the far left that ignores the magisterium in order to make evil good, like saying contraception is as good as NFP. And we should avoid the error of the far right that ignores the magisterium in order to make good evil, like saying NFP is as bad as contraception. Instead, we should be faithful to what the church teaches in sources like the Catechism or the Code of Canon Law. And we should listen to the exhortation found in Hebrews 13:17.
Go ahead.
Isn't it kind of ironic that he says we should do this, this, and this, and then let's go to this other source? Well, you just invalidated that other source, weren't you? And if he's going to say this, because what the I think the Hebrews passage is like, listen to your pastors, then shouldn't he be a pastor to say this?
Yes, that's clearly the issue. The listen to the bishop's argument doesn't really work when you're not a bishop and you're telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It says, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as men who will have to give account. We should obey, but we can also make our needs known to our pastors and even offer charitable criticism when appropriate, when it is done for the good of the church as a whole.
So he's presuming that none of the criticisms that have been brought up across this whole video that he disagrees with are being done the correct way or being done charitably, which
It's
is
the Michael Lofton thing. He didn't listen to my criticism. How am I supposed to respond to him? He didn't even listen to me. Not my fault.
And the funny thing is if we apply this Trent Horn argument, and if it was coming from the mouth of Michael Lofton's critique against who's the cardinal from Hong Kong, Cardinal Zen, he got smacked down after criticizing him. Like the Trent Horn, some people believe kooky things. Well, so you can disagree with those ones. Well, that works for Michael Lofton. So is he allowed to? If he thinks Cardinal Zen is wrong, is he allowed to disagree with him? I thought you have to submit to the cardinals. Well, then Cardinal Zen tells him what to do. So is he submitting or is he not submitting? Like, do you listen to the bishop? Do you not listen to the bishop? Where are we at with this? I don't know. Especially when, I'm allowed to make an argument from the catechism, but you're not. Fini. All done, guys. Enough of that. I don't know. What are your takeaways on this?
My takeaway is that Trent Horn needs a new career. It's just the case. I'm sorry.
My issue is really this. I don't know. Trent Horn won't see this, but if he were to see this, and I used to really like Trent Horn. I probably, no joke, watched until the last 4 months, whenever the crash out started, I'd watched every single one of his videos. But it's just like this. He's genuinely pretty talented when it comes to like arguing with James White, for example. He's a good, genuinely talented debater. He's a pretty good researcher. He's not a terrible. I haven't read his books, but I've heard good things about his books. And so it's like, and he's come up with good concepts, like his book concept, like when Protestants argue like atheists, he's turned that into videos too. Those are good concepts. Like there are things that he does well, but there's this one rule that I follow is that I don't punch right. So like if someone is more extreme than me on something, I don't attack them for it. This is like a political idea, but to some extent, it's a theological idea. You can apply it there. And I mean, it's a little bit different. But it's just like, he's just punching everyone, though. He's punching left. He's punching right. He's punching people who are like mostly the same as where he is. Like, where does the punching stop? You're just punching everyone. And it is because the logical conclusion of what he made of the argument he made in this video was what I say is correct and my interpretation is correct. The Protestant accusation kind of just gets turned around on him.
And what he could have done was say the NFP is just say NFP traditionally is done under the guidance of a priest. So it's under authority. Instead of just saying it's a blanket thing that anyone can use and is blessed by the church. Like, he makes these mistakes, and these are mistakes that professional theologians should not be making, because it opens him up for what ifs that he can't handle because his videos are too tight and too well made and too closed to be able to, like, he didn't address every single point. So now whoever's against him just gets to come out and firing at him like we did in this video today, because he's taking a very complex issue and it just is a bad example. I've said this before, especially about other people like Kennedy Hall. Examples are very hard to get right. It's actually a talent, and if you don't have the talent, you don't have it. It's just that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I only know this because the first 3 years of my time in college, I didn't have any examples right. And my professors pointed it out and marked me down for it for 3 years. And then you're just like, yes, I will literally copy whatever example my professor gives in the class. That's the only way I could get the examples right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just like, it is a really, like you're saying, it's a difficult thing. When you say this source means this example means this, it is difficult for amateurs to get that right every time. It's difficult for professionals to get that right all the time, but that's your job. Like, well, and so it's when, like, okay, you're good at doing the anti-Protestant thing. You can get it right when it comes to that. Okay, then why do you start punching in these other directions? Like, you can't be good at 45 different things, and when you start sucking at those 45 different things, then focus on the 2 or 3 things that you're good at and just do those. And that's, like, there are different people who have different expertise. That's why, especially on something like he was calling out E. Michael Jones, and E. Michael Jones has had his own crash out recently, but like, Jones is a legit intellectual. Like, when he chooses to go write an 800-page book on it, and you essentially dedicate like a 45-second like swipe at him during one of your videos, like you said, he's going to make an hour-long stream ripping you to shreds, and you're going to look dumb. When you dedicate, I mean, this was probably a 10-minute video, or if it was 13 minutes or something, whatever it was, and it was Tim Gordon's going to go make a 2-hour stream ripping through it. And Tim Gordon's a smart guy. He might be wrong, he might be right, but he has a strong case whether or not he's wrong or right to be making. And so this is just a very bad prudential decision to do what he's doing. It's just ridiculous. I don't know. let me check my notes really quick.
Also, there's a tone thing, and it's just one of the charisma things that Trent Horn has as just an observation. Trent Horn, I've seen him where he's completely human, personable, interesting. He's engaging. Then sometimes he comes off as like this mean, angry person who's reading an essay at you. And just sometimes when you're not accurate and you have the mean person on, and like we all do this from time to time, like, you can find this in most streamers. You're like, yeah, your personas are a little messed up with the content. I do this all the time. If it loses its bite, and since he's talking about he's supposed to be talking about dogmatic things, that truths, and then you lost your bite. It's no, man. That's the way to make an idiot out of yourself, and that's why you get critiqued.
Yeah.
There's one channel, I forget. It's like the Catholic Truth. It's the WM Review guys from Britain. I watched 20 minutes of them, and I pulled up 4 minutes of clips, and I had no criticisms. I just was making fun about that they were Thomists, because they were so tight and so accurate and so exact in what they were intending to do and how they were accomplishing it, that there's nothing weak in them. And it's possible to make non-weak arguments. But this vagueness of the right and the left and the fundamentalists and the rad trads, and like, there's 5 or 6 different groups in each of those that you just threw into a single term called fundamentalist. It's just not going to work.
Well, and yeah, it's just, and it's, yeah, the whole his thesis doesn't work. Like, if I were a professor, or if I were like a high school English teacher, and someone said, I want to write an essay on Catholic fundamentalists, and I said, okay, like, write an outline for your essay, and then I'll tell you if this topic is approved or not. And he came to me with the outline that you just said, I would say, this is a terrible outline. Either go pick a new topic or go redo your outline and reconfigure the concept. It just, from the outline of it, doesn't work, you know. I don't know. And it's easier to critique it, obviously, but, and I do agree with you on his personality thing. What I think a big part of it is you'll see, like, Father Mike Schmidt did a video anti MMA. Trent Horn likes MMA. He likes jiu-jitsu, he does kickboxing, and he respects Father Mike. And so because of that, the whole video is, well, I'm sure what Father Mike means is this. And, Father Mike says this, but I think it's just because he's never done it that he thinks this. It's not like Father Mike is wrong. He's making this assumption, and because of this, he's a fake priest. Like, and so it's just, you can clearly see where he does and doesn't respect someone, He's like a passive aggressive woman who gets vindictive. He'd be a firebrand and bloodthirsty if he was like William or Sam when they're ripping someone apart. Are William and Sam the people you were talking about?
Yeah, William Albrecht and Sam Shamoon.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
They are notable that so there's a little thing you notice about content creators, that most content creators only make content that they're going to get victories in. When William Albrecht or Sam Shamoon know they can reach for the jugular, if you let them bite, they will bite, and they will not let go without a fight. It is fantastic.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it is a smart decision to make too, as far as just like, if you're a professional Catholic, like, your job is to make the objective truth seem as appealing as possible. And Trent ain't
to
been doing that
look
recently.
like a Lord of the Rings outcast character, like when Brian Holdsworth, and then just like comb your hair on stream, and they won't even hear the words.
Maybe. Should I get my mustache? Are you still happy? Yeah, I don't know. Well, and it's even like, there are people who do generalist stuff, like, who just talk about whatever, but they don't really like Brian Holdsworth just kind of talks about whatever. I mean, he's clearly educated on some specific things, but Brian Holdsworth isn't accusing people of things, and it's like, Trent, why are you making general content and accusing people of and he's making very pointed and very hot accusations. Like, if you're gonna claim that you're a Catholic, but you're essentially a Protestant with how far astray you've gone, like, you should be able to write me like an essay on that. It shouldn't be a 45-second swipe in a video, And he did it. He did full debate with Imam as an example, but it's like, but then you just did full debate with him. You can just say, well, go watch my debate. Don't just send a 45-second swipe at him after the fact.
Yeah, and Trent Horn has actually done very good debates, and he's done commentary on his own debates where he's like, I knew this was going to come, so I was able to prepare with this. It's in his video, like what topics I will and won't debate. That video, he does actually really good job explaining his thought process about content and debates. But then it just doesn't seem like he takes his own advice.
Yeah. Well, and you can see, especially with the thing that happened to a certain group of people during World War II video, where that's a really good example of him kind of not taking his own advice, and he got really raked over the coals over it.
That idiot.
Yeah,
that was honestly retarded. I've made this point because there's people on the World War II thing on both sides, even some radical, even some sedevacantist who are like, we love the H-man. And it's like, yeah, and they'll bring out a quote, and then I'll bring out a Barack Obama quote. Barack Obama said that the Earth started to heal in 2007 when he got the nominee. He said that. That's an actual real quote. The Earth started to heal. The oceans started desalinating. Healthcare was fixed. The economy was great again. So if I take the same standard Trent Horn and the people who love the H-man do, I can say that's what actually happened. It's like, no, you can't use secular quotes as if they were dogmatic quotes blessed by infallibility. This is why trads and all the traditionalists from the entire sect of Christianity, we all look for that infallible truth because that becomes the hinge for everything else, and it's a different category than history. It's like that's your cement.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think it's a shame because he's, in my mind at least, kind of largely discredited himself, especially in recent, like, I watched his video that he put out today. It was not bad. It was a fine. I think I probably agreed with almost everything he said in the video, but it was just like, okay, why are you bringing that up prudentially? But then the whole time I'm going, but I don't like you anymore because you've done this. Like, I don't want to listen to you. I don't really trust you. So it's like, yeah, you might get one thing right, but what have you done to kind of between here? Do I trust you? And it's like, man, I don't know. I don't want to make my personal beef with him into a whole thing or anything, but I don't know.
Yay, personal beef. Yay. All content is better when it's personable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Are we about done here? I think that's a good, pretty good time startup closing up.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, you have a great rest of your night. Thank you for coming on, everybody. Thank you for watching. Everyone have a great rest of your night. Thank you for tuning in. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Let me end the stream.